Hi there, my name's John Fraser and I'm here to give you a few tips about preparing your presentation for this weekend. Now, I'm going to divide it into three sections. The first is about language and accuracy. The second is about the content and organization. And the third is about argumentation and reasoning. Let's start with language. Most Russian people I come across are terrified of English verbs. We use such a wide variety compared to Russian, and they frequently find they have trouble dealing with them. The important thing to know about English verbs is that they do not necessarily change the action described. They merely draw attention and emphasis to the aspect of the action that they're describing. So, I could say, I went to the cinema last week. On my way, I met a friend. I decided to have coffee with him. Or I could say, I was going to the cinema last week when I met a friend and I decided to have coffee with him. Or I could say, I was going to the cinema last week when I met a friend and we decided that we would have coffee instead. Grammatically, they are all perfectly correct. The difference is that in each one, it's drawing attention to a particular aspect of the overall action taken. So, when you come to use your verbs, you're demonstrating your ability in English, not just that you know how these verbs are formed. English grammar is probably better taught in Russian schools than it is in English schools. You're demonstrating how you can put that knowledge to use. Don't be scared of trying out new ideas in how you put your verbs to use. I can talk to you about adjectives and adverbs. English is incredibly rich in these. They're the building blocks of our language. They're incredibly adaptable. We can put suffixes, we can put prefixes, we can change an adjective into an adverb, we can change an adverb into a noun. We can do all sorts of things with them. They are, I repeat, the building blocks of good English. Before you make your presentation, therefore, look at your adjectives. See if you can develop them. See if you can put as many as possible into use. There are some slight differences to that, and I'll explain them later when we get on to content and organization. You've got a problem because you're trying to demonstrate that you are proficient in the English language. And, as in any other language, there are basically two forms. There's the colloquial language, which we use in ordinary, everyday speech. And there's the formal language, which we use for formal occasions. Again, this is true in any language. You do not speak to your friends in the coffee bar with the Russian that you learned reading Pushkin. Equally, you do not present to your teachers an essay written in the same language that you would use in the coffee bar with your friends. You have to get the balance right on this with the presentation, and again, I will talk about this in more detail later. Finally, be very, very, very careful of making direct translations between a Russian colloquial expression and a British one. They often do not mean the same thing. I invite you to do a grammatical translation of tuck, tuck, tuck. You'll probably find it comes out something like so, so, so. But what does that mean? What it really translates as is, be quiet, I am concentrating. Let me think about this. If you want the English equivalent, it's not so, so, so. It's, well, which makes as much sense in grammatical English as tack, 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 does in grammatical Russian. Be careful. Again, I will talk more about this when we get on to content and organization. So, content and organization. Making a presentation is very much like going fishing. Your first objective when you go fishing is to get the fish to come to you. And to do this, you use bait. You use a nice, juicy, wriggly worm. The fish is attracted to it, so it will come to it. The audience is your fish. Before you do anything else, you have to get them attending to you, listening to you, and, metaphorically speaking, coming to you. So you give them some bait. You start with an introduction. Now, here is where I will seem to speak contrary to what I have just told you. The secret of a good introduction is that it is simple. It has short sentences. And in English, we use wherever we can the simplest verb forms. We're not in the introduction trying to sell our idea. We are trying to get people to pay attention to us. So we give them short, simple descriptions of what we are going to say. The next section is the body. This is where you're going to make your pitch. This is where you're going to sell your ideas and your concepts. Now, you've attracted the audience to you with your nice, simple, wriggly worm. Now is the time to start using the different verb forms. Now is the time to start putting into action all those descriptive adjectives and adverbs. Now is the time to start painting a picture with your words. Basic hints I can give here seems in many ways to me a little bit ridiculous to be talking to Russian people about. Inside every Russian is a poet. This is the most literary country in the world. Each one of you listening to this, planning your presentation, has got a poet bursting inside of him or her. Let the poet out. Give him English words to build his poetry with, yes, but let the Russian poet loose. He's the one who can create the picture which you're trying to put to your audience. And don't fool yourselves. This is what you are doing. You are not making a speech. You are painting a picture in somebody's mind, but you're using words, not brushes and paints. Put those adjectives into use. Really let the poet go. We'll talk in detail in the next section about making your argument, but the big secret here, be a Russian poet. You now have to reel him in. This is where you put your conclusion together at the end of your argument. Now here you have to get a combination of your introduction and your body. And this can be difficult because you have to strike a balance. You have to make it fairly simple and straightforward because these are the final ideas that your audience is going to come away with. But you also have to make those ideas attractive. So you need to let the Russian poet out again. But this time, put a chain around his legs. Tie his hands behind his back. Let him be a little bit less Russian in the conclusion. Combination, therefore. The three main stages again. First stage, attracting the audience. Your worm. Simple language, short sentences, simple tenses. Body, poetic, descriptive, paint the picture. Conclusion, a combination of the two, short and to the point, but don't rub the picture out while you're making it short and to the point. The last section, argument and counter-argument. Now this, of course, will be largely dealt with in the central part of your presentation, the body of the presentation. The temptation is for you to put forward your points strongly and, as I said, poetically. Be careful. Never put forward a point of your own without presenting a counter-argument. This has got two advantages. On one hand, it demonstrates that you are not simply some bigot with an idea. You are someone who has looked at the question. You have evaluated both sides, and you have taken into account the argument against your thoughts. Now, having said that, there are certain tricks to make your argument seem stronger. Never, never, never dismiss a counter-argument out of hand. This could be quite difficult to explain. One of the big secrets of the English language is its habit of understatement. If you have bought a new dress and you ask your boyfriend, who happens to be English, what he thinks of it, he will probably say, "Not bad," and you will probably be quite offended. But what you don't realise is that by saying "not bad," he means it's wonderful, it's terrific. So, when you are putting a counter-argument, never dismiss it out of hand. If I could give a good example, if I were opposed to a new tax plan by the British government, I would never say, "The government is wrong, they're making a mistake, this is terrible." I would more likely say something like, "It is possible that the government are making a serious mistake here." I will understate it. This is very important when you're using English. So, when you put an opposing argument, the secret, of course, is to make it much shorter than your own, but you always preface it with something like, "Some people might say, it could be said." There is a slight evidence of, you don't dismiss it entirely, you simply relegate it to a lower level with an expression like that. Equally, when you're making your own argument, you never say, "This is right." You say, "It seems to me, evidence would suggest, we are of the opinion that." You make it sound as though you have considered carefully the opposing evidence before you come to your own conclusion. There are a few specifics I could put in here. Let me immediately say we're back to the problem of tack, tack, tack. Yes. Russian translations do not always come over as intended. So, be very, very careful of saying "of course." You see, there are occasions in English, and unless you're very practiced at it, you might not spot them, where there is a subtext to "of course." It could also mean, "You are stupid." A good example of this would be somebody standing next to a railway station and asking, "Can I get a train from here?" The answer, "of course," doesn't just mean "yes, you can." It means "yes, you can, and you are a complete idiot if you didn't notice that." So be careful with it. You can use it, but be very, very careful. The other one, which I hear an awful lot from my Russian students, is "as I know." Avoid it like the plague. Because although the grammatical translation is absolutely correct, in English this suggests that you are the only expert, you are the egotist, you know and everybody else is stupid and doesn't know. I know that's not what it means when my Russian friends use it, but an awful lot of English-speaking people don't know, and they make an incredibly wrong assumption about the Russian people talking to them. It's far better to say something like, "I believe, it seems to me." Again, English understatement. One final personal plea. The number of times when I have been training people for English language exams, and there is a speaking section in it, and I do not know the reason for this. There must be something in the Russian language psyche which I have never discovered. But apparently many Russian people are addicted to the word interesting. Now, there's nothing wrong with the word as such, but it tends to be overused. And the number of times when I have been adjudicating in an English speaking exam and my 10th student comes in and tells me he's studying English because it's an interesting language and he finds English language films interesting and he loves reading Shakespeare because it's interesting, I get to the stage where, however fair I try to be, at the back of my mind I think, oh God, not another interesting Russian. Now this is purely a personal thing, as I say. I would strongly recommend you to find another word than interesting. I hope these comments have been of help to you. I hope you are looking forward as much to the event as I am doing, because I am looking forward to it very much. And I hope we can have a time which is interesting. Thank you.